Whatever you're comfortable. Okay. Ketwa Alapin Shneknukwa, Enchesh Mihaliksa, Litwat Wolfkan Shlatlim Ken. Hello, everybody. My name is Mihaliksa, and I'm from the Lil'wat Nation. In English, my name is Alison Pascal. I'm the curator at the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center. Thank you for joining the SLCC for their fourth and final Breaking Bannock. Today we're talking with Simpian Tilalush, Levi Nelson of the Lil'wat Nation, and we're broadcasting from the Lil'wat Nation in Levi's art studio. We're very proud of Levi and all of his accomplishments, and I'll get Levi to introduce himself a little bit before we get right into the broadcast.
All right. Katwa'o, Inchash Sapian Tilalush, Lil'wat Wolfkan, Upamufkan, Shatliufkan. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on, is it Facebook? Or through SLCC Zoom. And welcome to my studio here on Love Street. We're at my very modest studio that has no electricity, no running water, doesn't even have stairs. Alison had to climb a ladder just to get up here. Yeah. And I'm happy to say that since my last art show, I made enough, I guess, money to actually put electricity and running water. Oh, so anyway, welcome to my studio and welcome to the webinar. Thanks for being with me and us.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to have Levi chat with us and talk about his journey as an artist, and we're going to be showing some pieces and he's going to be talking about them. And one of our focuses for today will be struggle many Lil'wat Nation artists have in what is the Lil'wat style when we have pictographs and petroglyphs for references, but then we get into this brand new medium of painting or glasswork or textiles. So that's something that we all address in all of the work that we're doing. And Levi is a contemporary painter, I guess. He works a lot in oils, but he's also getting into many other mixed media. So if you've been following his career, you'll see a lot of his work popping up around Pemberton and in Whistler. He just finished a show. But yeah. For the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center, if you guys may have heard, or if you haven't heard, today is our grand reopening after the coronavirus shutdown. Yesterday, we celebrated with a Squamish and Lil'wat Nation Day, which was a huge success. We had, I'm gonna say, between 50 to 100 people come in, but the building was full of life, and all of our lead singers got to take turns drumming and singing all over the building, in the cafe, up in the main hall, out in the back deck. We also celebrated the graduation of our IYA students. Their term was cut short by 2 weeks so that we could all go home and be safe and sound in our houses. We're very fortunate that we did shut down and go into safety, so all of our staff is happy and healthy through the shutdown, and everyone's very happy to be back at work and back at our second house. Also we wanted to just share that we will be open on Wednesday, July 1st to celebrate Canada Day. Our regular hours, or our hours just after reopening, are going to be Thursday to Sunday. So we will be closed Monday, Tuesday, and a Wednesday to the public. And we'll be keeping our same hours of 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if you're in Whistler, come on by and say hello to our staff and see what we've been doing during the quarantine and see what projects we're working on. So I'll turn it back over to Levi to talk about first painting. Can you see?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll stand up.
Okay.
So I have 3 paintings here that I'm going to talk about. They weren't painted this year. I think they were painted back in 2016. Oh, that says 2019 because I forgot I redid this part here. I reworked it, but yeah. These were part of my class 2017. So on the left here, we have a painting called Void. And beside that, Cultural Fragments. And the third painting I'll be talking about is called Politics and Tradition. And I believe this is also from 2019. They're all done in oil. And what I'm exploring here is shapes of the Northwest Coast. So back in 2017, I took a painting course with Elizabeth McIntosh, who is one of a really well-known Canadian painter. And I guess one of the questions I'm asking now is, what does contemporary Indigenous painting look like? And how do I, as a Lil'wat artist, navigate painting and still make reference to Indigenous culture? And through, I guess, one thing that I struggle with personally is that the Lil'wat Nation, there's not a lot of, I guess, artifacts besides basketry and stone tools. And like with other neighboring nations like the Northwest Coast, they have totem poles and house posts and paintings and such a developed style that I'm trying to figure out or develop my own style, referencing Northwest Coast and also what it means to be a Lil'wat. So I've only been painting intensely for about 5 years. And I think I'm still pretty young at where I'm at. And
oh wow!
Yeah. So when I first started painting, I was doing a lot of like you see in Pemberton right now, along their banner and hydro boxes that I designed. Those paintings were some of my very first paintings done in the Ojibwe style, and like heavily influenced by Norval Morrisseau. And I used that style to kind of hone my brush technique and my color palette and get a feel for color. But when I started going to Emily Carr University, you learn about, I guess, authenticity and what you want to say as an artist. So I'm coming now, moving closer to home, to the Northwest Coast, where for me, as I guess Lil'wat would be considered Salish, interior Salish nation. And so looking at the neighbors of the Northwest Coast is what I'm currently exploring today.
Yeah, Levi, can you tell us a little bit more maybe about the influence of this painting?
Sure. Well, I was doing a bunch of different sketches and looking at the different shapes of the Northwest Coast. Like here we have sort of abstract or highly stylized split U form hanging onto like the edge of a ovoid. And then now down here we have another split. And I call this painting Void because I didn't want to just explore what these shapes and colors do with each other. I also wanted to have something to say about Indigenous culture, or I guess my personal exploration. I've noticed through a lot of the work that I do, it speaks to being displaced, because I guess what I'm looking at or questioning today is, where do Aboriginal people exist or belong in the bigger conversation? So the titles like Void and Cultural Fragments and Politics and Tradition, they all speak to that. I don't know, they all sort of have a, I don't want to say political undertone, but commenting on where we're at.
Yeah, and I think that that idea or that questioning is very common and very relevant throughout Indigenous people across Canada and also down in the United States. I mean, a lot of people have been moved off of their home territory or have chosen to move away from their home territory because they didn't have the resources to stay there, and they just navigate to the city because there's a lot of jobs and there's a lot of housing available. As for myself, I also moved away from home to find myself and find what I wanted to do with my life. But I was lucky I was really close to home, so I never had that really void kind of feeling. But in talking and working with a lot of the Aboriginal youth ambassadors or the Indigenous youth ambassadors that come through our program, I do know that this is something that people are really hungry for, that they have this void of culture and love and history, and we're all looking for answers and finding out how we connect to our culture and how you could have that connection even if you do choose to stay away from your home territory. So this theme I find is really common and really relevant even for people of many other nationalities, because Canada does have a large immigrant population. We're multicultural, and everybody's got that hunger for home. So in Levi's series, he's addressing it from a Lil'wat or an Indigenous point of view. Yeah, so I really like the color palettes. Can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration of these?
Yeah, so cultural, excuse me, cultural fragments here. I was exploring blocks of color and
Did you see him?
And the color palette actually came from a beach show that I bought at Walmart, and it has all these brightly colored triangles on it.
I'm watching this.
Came to
this right, you're over there.
When I was doing this painting at the time, I was studying a lot of Picasso and Braque and Cubism, so you could see like how it's broken up into different geometric shapes, except with the different shading is not there. This is an earlier exploration of Northwest Coast shapes, like playing around with ovoids and split U's. And at this point in my painting, I guess, and I had a very limited knowledge of Northwest Coast rules and the different guidelines that artists follow. So I was approaching it from Western.
Hi, Brady.
I don't know where that came from, but I guess understanding painting is a European tradition. I'm trying to, I guess, have a conversation deal with what Europeans did in painting with Cubism, but trying to bring Indigenous shapes into that.
Yeah, I love it. It's really bright and colorful, and I do recognize a lot of the shapes from a lot of the carvings that we have at the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center. I find it really exciting to see such modern paintings.
Yeah, with a lot of the art and carvings that you see at the SLCC that use these shapes, the shapes come together to form a figure. More, I mean, like 99% of the time, they come together to form like an animal or a human, like a bear or a wolf or a salmon. I was questioning, like, how do these shapes, or how could they function by themselves?
I see. Yeah, really interesting.
Going over to this painting here, this is Politics and Tradition. And I painted this in another painting class at Emily Carr University with Ravi Jackson, who is a visiting artist. And he just said, if you guys, his instruction was, if you want to be painters, you have to paint. So I showed up. I was one of the only students in class on the first day of class, ready with the canvas and my paintings and an idea. And at the time, I was looking at collage. And so I sketched out all of these different shapes of like the different eye shapes and cut them up into little pieces and assembled them, photographed it, and used that photo reference as the painting.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But the reason I call this politics and tradition is on the day that I was painting it, there was news that like 5 chiefs of, I believe, the Wet'suwet'en were 5 chiefs were stripped of their hereditary titles.
Oh yes,
because they sided with the pipeline. And so I did that painting on that day that I learned of that, and called this politics and tradition because I there's a lot of like traditional laws that don't mesh well with Western politics. And I thought that the division of these shapes spoke to that idea.
This piece for me is really powerful because as somebody that works at the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center, where we celebrate the culture of our 2 nations, I find that the idea of power is much different within the Indigenous community than it is with the Western community, where people in our community with a lot of power are very extremely generous, and they often don't keep all of their gifts for themselves. I'm very fortunate to work with a lot of chiefs, both elected and hereditary, and a lot of knowledge keepers, and I've seen them give away just about everything that they've been blessed with. So for me, this is really very interesting because we've seen, or we've heard in history, seen in the news and seen on Facebook, a lot of times the power seems to corrupt leaders within our nations. I remember hearing about this story as well, and just being really shocked and really kind of proud of that nation, because those leaders were put there by their families to respect their families and to carry out their decisions. And when they went against their community, against their families, that there was responsibilities and kind of like, in our communities, we all have inherent rights, but we also all have inherent responsibilities. And when they neglected to follow through for their community, it was just really empowering to see people take back that kind of ownership and elect somebody or put forth somebody that would honor those agreements. And so for me in the Lil'wat Nation, as a Ukwamooch person, I always kind of struggle with, so I have all of these rights, I have all of these privileges, what's the balance, and what's my responsibility to the culture, what's my responsibility to my family, and so it's kind of like this fine balance of just sharing, and kind of reminding myself every day that I've been really blessed to work at the cultural center, so now I need to be willing and able to share everything that I've learned to help all of these young people kind of find their excitement about culture. And it doesn't have to be traditional basket weaving or traditional carving. It's really exciting to see all of these new contemporary ways, because our culture is a reflection of the land. And so it was never meant to be stuck in a box, and it was never meant to be just one thing or one version only. So it's really exciting, and I really love it.
Thanks. Yep.
Oh, did you want to talk about your latest piece that you're working on?
Sure. So at the moment at the Tazeel Learning Center in Mount Currie, I'm working on, I actually just came from there. I'm working on a 10-foot by 8-foot high painting for this huge 100% green energy home that's being built in the Sioux Valley. It's actually near completion, but I got to go up there. I guess the guy who's the head of the project or whatever drove me up 6 kilometers down this road on a side by side, and I got to see this amazing house that's like 100% solar energy. And anyway, they commissioned me to do a painting for this house that I wish I could show it to you, but I guess with the setup right now, you'll have to wait until I post it later.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all of the paintings that we set out to look at. And the theme, I think, is so large that I don't know if it will ever be complete because of the evolving nature of our community, the evolving nature of our language. So it's something that each individual person will address for themselves. And it's really exciting to see the progression of very young people who find their passion and are just doing so well, and who are being celebrated throughout the province. I know Levi just had his first solo show at the Millennium Place. Yeah.
Maurice Young.
Maurice Young.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of hydro boxes done in his older style in Pemberton, as well as banners in Pemberton. So you can see his work in public arts. Do you have any show? Oh yeah, and he's got a piece at the O'Dane. Yeah. Which gallery is that piece in?
So the O'Dane Art Museum in Whistler recently bought my painting Nations in an Urban Landscape for their permanent collection. So I'm the first Lil'wat Nation artist to be a part of the O'Dane's permanent collection there in Whistler. It's not currently on display, it's still in the vault, but it's last week in the mail I received my lifetime membership. Nice. Because I belong to that museum now. And it's a dream come true, definitely. When I'm about a year and a half, it was a while back when I was meeting with Maureen Douglas of Arts Whistler. Hi, Maureen, if you're watching, and thank you for everything that you've done. We were meeting and talking about my show that was going to happen there after the blast, and it's right across from the O'Dane Art Museum. And I pointed at it and I said, you know, one day my art is going to be in that building. So on opening night, Curtis Collins of the O'Dane came to my show and mentioned that he really liked Nations in an Urban Landscape. And yeah, the rest is history. I found out about a month before they were going to purchase it, but I had to keep it secret for that long for everything like sponsorship to come through to purchase the painting. And yeah, I guess I have to continue to be an artist and develop my skill and stay a painter. I'm going to.
Yeah, so for all of your fans, is there a place where they could view your collection, or how do they contact you if they wanted to purchase a piece?
So you could find me on Facebook, Levi Nelson. I have a public album on there with all of my paintings, all the different styles, drawings, some prints, and you can find me at levinelson.artiste on Instagram, and that's about it. I don't have a website. Yeah, I'm working on it.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So we'll check to see if we have any questions. Bear with me. Hope I don't lose you guys. Oh, from Deb. Hi, from Deb Browning. I used to teach you jump math. So my other question is, Bannock is a colonial food, not traditional. Well, the version of Bannock that you see around most places is a colonial food. It's actually from Scotland. In the Lil'wat Nation, we used to take black lichen and steam it and crush it down into a form that looks like the bread loaves that you see now. And they would dry those out and eat those through the winter. But when white flour came to be, it just tastes so good and it was so easy to make and work with that we switched over to the Bannock that you'll find at the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center.
I agree. I think that Bannock is a colonial food. And I mean, the evidence is in the flour ingredient.
And the sugar.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes into some really kind of like a darker history about governments rationing food. And one of the available, I guess, ingredients that you could pick up through the Indian agent was flour. So learning how to use that and survive on what's available is,
Yeah. So for many of you, the knowledge of residential school and post-contact history with the Canadian government and Indigenous people, it hasn't always been so great. The Indigenous people are currently the second most oppressed people in Canada. The only people that are more oppressed are people that are in penitentiaries. So a lot of our work is kind of confronting that history, finding our culture, and kind of reconciling a relationship with the Canadian government and with Canada as it is today. So it's, again, an ongoing practice that each and every person will address for themselves.
I think it's also important to stress that Bannock makes any meal a feast, and when Indigenous people gather, we have Bannock. So and we've been doing this forever, that we've adopted it as a traditional food because it brings us together and inspires that community feeling.
Yeah, so yeah, that's another really interesting part of our culture, is something that is introduced and how it can be a staple within our diets, and we include it with all of our meals when we can, and we also mix it up. And one of the most exciting things about being in the coronavirus quarantine is that the SLCC now makes Bannock donuts. Our chef Thea is doing strawberry rhubarb.
Oh my gosh.
And if you haven't had them, come to the SLCC because they're just way too amazing. So I'm gonna look at the chat page to see what else is up there. Oh, from Deb Browning, Levi, I think he wanted to be a fashion designer, and she thinks she taught you jump math at Mount Currie School.
Yeah, that's true. So that is true. In high school, I wanted to be a fashion designer, and I chased that dream. And I went to school in Toronto at the International Academy of Design back in 2001. And interesting thing happened. It was in around 9/11. I was 17. I graduated early. I moved to Toronto to pursue this fashion design career. And I got really depressed there because I was by myself, and it was culture shock, and it was the first time I was alone. And eventually 9/11 happened, and it was so close to Toronto that I freaked out. I called my mom, and she flew me back home. But I still enjoy the creativity behind fashion design. But I guess one thing I realized going into that is that it's such it's an industry where you're in one season and you're out the next, and it's a very competitive market, and you more often than not end up working for another designer. So I kind of fell away from that, and then I went to acting school for a number of years, and kind of moved away from that. And actually, funny thing about jump math, I wasn't good at math either in fashion design school, so I had difficulty with the pattern making.
Yeah.
But yeah, the one thing I was constantly doing since high school through fashion design and acting was I was painting, and I didn't know that this would one day be my calling. I just always, anything I ever wanted to do, anything I was interested in, I went after it. I never questioned, or I thought, maybe I'm not good enough or I can't do it. I just was always creatively driven to succeed somehow. And I guess painting was it.
Painting's it till you're inspired by something else.
I guess so.
That's a really good view.
Maybe sculpture. I don't know.
Yeah. Next up, what else do we have? Sally, she wonders if we can comment on the role of museums and cultural centers in assisting us in the reconciliation process. Yeah, that's a really good question. I know the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center just hosted a webinar with Corey Douglas, and his theme was art and reconciliation. So we can be partners with people who are very passionate about this issue. And I think whenever you look at art pieces, the story comes up and it helps you to address it. And so for now, the SLCC is partnering with people who are very passionate about it and have started that work. In the future, one of our goals is to be more of the driver of hosting areas, or kind of just getting together to address the topic. That's one of our goals, but we're not quite there yet.
I think there's a really interesting conversation happening right now behind or around systemic racism, and how, like, a lot of people are asking, how do we address that? And one of the things that came up when I was listening to a radio show the other day on CBC was that institutions, it's the responsibility of institutions to give up some of that sort of power to other people, of like BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous people of color. But I think when it comes to museums and reconciliation, there's a very important relationship that happens between First Nations people and I think in particular museums in British Columbia, they're really starting to understand the importance of showing diversity. I read this article, and it was about the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it was written by one of the curators, and they were talking about the new show about pushing out, white heterosexual male artists and making room for diversity, like female artists and artists of color. And one of the comments that was made by the curators was that if you're a museum and you're an institution or a curator, if you're not paying attention to the importance of showing diverse artists, then you're not with the times. And one thing I see that's really important right now is that museums are really pushing for diversity, and Indigenous people, of course, in British Columbia and across Canada have, I think, a really strong point of view and something to say.
Awesome. Let's see what else we have. Okay, from Isla. Levi, how have you been getting through the lockdown, and has it inspired you to paint more or to do other things?
Well, I'm in my last year at university, so there was a bit of a disruption with my classes there. We had to leave campus early and finish everything up online. since the kind of like the wrap up of school, I have this really big commission that's been keeping me occupied. Yesterday in the mail, the Aboriginal Gathering Place of Emily Carr University sent me a care package for students to keep them occupied during the COVID-19 lockdown. So like in this package, there was porcupine quills, there's seal fur, there's dyed rabbit fur, there was like salmon leather. Like, who knew you could make leather out of salmon skin?
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to exploring the porcupine quills and kind of see what I can make out of that. But I guess I'm working on this huge commission right now, and one of the kind of sticky things about commissions is that yes, it is a guaranteed you're guaranteed to get paid for it. So I'm kind of struggling right now with thinking about what my next show is going to look like, what my next set of paintings are going to look like, and what I want to say with my upcoming work. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I wrap up this commission and I can start to focus on my next show. And I did this painting. It was a small study painting called Good Old Government Housing. And it was just a painting of sort of your typical government house on an Indian reserve, and how to kind of run down on that. And I'm kind of interested in exploring that through a series of paintings and possibly some sculpture. Yeah, so I'm constantly busy. This is my life. I'm an artist, and the wheels are always turning.
It's your joy and your challenge.
Yeah. That's my current painting. I'm really dove into studying Northwest Coast shapes and the different ideas behind how form line is used, and I'm really excited about developing that further.
Okay. So we're coming to the end of our webinar. Thank you everybody for joining in, and thank you for all of the really great questions. Again, I wanted to say, if you are coming up to Whistler, I know we just entered phase 3 of reopening Canada. So if you are coming up to Whistler and wanted to visit the SLCC, we're open Thursday to Sunday, 10 to 5 p.m. And we are opening up on Canada Day to join the celebration. Again, thank you for joining us for this very interesting topic. I think this is one topic that will be covered many times from many different points of view.
Thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope you're taking care of yourself during this weird time. Yeah, be kind to one another. Thank you so much.
Yeah. See you.